Welcome to Reclaiming Our Spiritual Heritage, an LGBTQ spirituality conference. Today we're speaking with Toby Johnson, Catholic monk turned activist, psychotherapist, and spiritual writer. Welcome, Toby.
Hi, Christian. Nice to be here. I really love the name of the seminar, Reclaiming Spiritual Heritage. There's so much that it has been lost in the modern understanding.
I'm not surprised that you like it because it reflects so much of what your work has been about.
Yes.
But let's rewind a little bit. I want to start in the beginning. And I realize you've written books about it, but I want to ask you a little bit about your spiritual journey. And the fact that you started out as a monk lets us know that you always had this thirst, this hunger for spiritual connection and for spiritual expression, to serve in some way, which I know has also manifested in different ways at different points in your life. But tell us a little bit about that journey, what it was like, and how did you know that you had this inside you?
I grew up as a young Catholic. I believed everything they taught in school. The nuns clearly were special because they were dressed strange, and it was a beautiful kind of magical, mystical universe that I learned. I know also a little later, once I got into high school, there was the question of dating girls and beginning to get into the normal life. I was raised sort of on the edge of the upper middle class in San Antonio. My parents were wholesale florists, which is a nice business, flowers to make the world beautiful. And the grade school I went to was the upper class school, St. Peter's, Prince of the Apostles grade school. And we took dancing lessons. And, I learned how to ballroom dance. Something later on turned out to be a good thing. I'm glad I did. But I got scared by that heterosexuality and the idea of dating girls, and how was I going to cope with that world? I didn't understand the drive. And I went to the Catholic high school that was taught by the Brothers of Mary, and they were such nice guys, and religious life looked so wonderful. And my mother was a little mystical and read Thomas Merton, and I started reading Thomas Merton and thought about being a Trappist and live in Merton. Thomas Merton was this Catholic writer right at the start of the end of World War II, who really popularized monasticism among Catholics, and I fell into that. So I went off, joined the order that taught at my taught at the high school, the Brothers of Mary. Had a wonderful year in novitiate, living like a monk. And then went to college with them. After the second year, I was told to leave. They had recognized that I was gay and that I was sort of a troublemaker. I was the class leader, and was leading the class in a revolution against the superior because they weren't showing enough respect.
I'm not surprised to know that you were the troublemaker. As you know, I was also raised in a Catholic, very Catholic family. I studied with the Jesuits, and I thought I wanted to be a priest. And I think, like you, part of me was a legitimate, vocation, that desire to serve and to make a difference.
Yes.
And looking back on it, I think it was also a way that I could sublimate my sexuality, because in those days I naively believed that priests were actually celibate. And for me, that was a way that I didn't have to deal with sexuality at all. Was that part of what was going on with you as well?
Well, a little bit. I think I was growing up in the late 50s and early 60s with all of this, and I simply didn't know what sex was. I've joked that I must have been absent the day they explained purity in catechism class, because for years I never understood what that idea was about. or what sex was that needed to be suppressed. I think in a way, I think that was good for me. It's amazing to think that today young children, end up being exposed to sex and understand what sex is. I hope that's an improvement. Um, Part of the trick, though, is learning positive things about sex, and the mainstream religious traditions, Christianity being the big one in the United States, simply has no theory of sexuality. There's no explanation other than that this is something that heterosexuals do when they're married in order to have children. No explanation of how you might find God in this, or how this might contribute to religious experience.
Yeah, it's all about reproduction.
Yeah.
So,
just to finish the story for a minute, I went to St. Louis University, Jesuit, met an order there called the Servites, who were modernizing and doing all the things that I had wanted the Marianists to do. So I joined the Servites. Look, there's my Servite habit there. I still have it hanging on the door. With them, I got to California, and they had a house in San Francisco, right in the Haight-Ashbury district. And I visited there 1967, the Summer of Love, and ended up, but I joined the Servites, worked one summer in of the summer of '69 in a pastoral clinical education program for chaplains in a mental hospital, and had my experience that summer of coming out and realizing I was gay, and that was something to be proud of. And right on time, with Stonewall. It was sort of amazing. I don't think I knew anything about Stonewall, but I came out that summer, and then moved to San Francisco.
At a time where the Haight-Ashbury was actually the gay neighborhood, the gayborhood.
Sort of, and the hippie, the idealistic future. The hippie movement was really such a wonderful idea. It got turned into crystals and odd-looking stuff and strange clothes, but long hair. I actually ended up leaving the order because they told me to cut my hair, and I said I wouldn't.
One thing, it's such a fascinating story your life story. One aspect that really, really fascinates me and that I love and that I would love to delve deeper into is your experience with Joseph Campbell, which you write about in your autobiography, Finding Your Own True Myth. What an incredible privilege to have worked with him and to have known him. And so, easy question: what did you learn from him?
Oh, okay. Well, I've got one of the books is subtitled "What I Learned from Joseph Campbell." So
that's what I was meaning.
It goes on 25 pages or something. After I moved to San Francisco, I went to school at the California Institute of Asian Studies, and ran in comparative religion. I had read Campbell when I was in college, and it had been sort of a wake up to understand that there are other religions, and that Christianity Catholicism isn't the only religion, and that there are other ways of conceiving of the religious reality, spiritual reality. And so I was continuing the education in comparative religion. I saw that Campbell was giving a talk, and I wanted to go see him. It was at a retreat center in Ukiah, about 100 miles north of San Francisco, and I signed up for a work scholarship. So I got in cheap and was asked to come up a day early to help clean the building. There's a whole story about this place, the Man Ran seminar program. Too much to get into here, but I met Campbell. He also arrived early, and met him in this casual, friendly sort of way. He took a liking to me. the sort of the story. Campbell, taught at Sarah Lawrence, which in those days was a girls' school. So his students were all young women. And he was a sort of a proto-feminist, and certainly this was a good thing for him. He was straight, and I'm sure enjoyed the attention of the women. But I think he also enjoyed the attention of young men who might have been his sons. Not that he thought of me as a son, but he liked attention from young men who were like himself, who'd been a young man at one time. Anyway, I from working there that summer, or for that one seminar for him, I got a job at the Man Ranch seminars and worked there for 5 summers. He was always the big draw. And then after the Man Ranch ended, I was part of the crew that worked his appearances in the Bay Area. So became part of his life on the West Coast and corresponded with him and really understood myself to, and his understanding of religion from over and above. It doesn't matter about the details. Understand what religion is about as a manifestation of consciousness, dynamics and consciousness, a much bigger thing than the detail of religion. That helped so much alleviate the religious worries about being gay. It's right. Those are like all of it. That's just minor details. And you have to toss out the ones that don't work for you and embrace the ones that do. And we're really in a position now of kind of creating our own religions because we understand what all the religions are around the world. And some of them don't have very good track records. So let's make a better religion.
So you've referred to yourself in the past as Joseph Campbell's apostle to the gay community, the LGBTQ community. What does that mean to you? And what about his work do you find especially relevant to our community?
Well, as I say, the ability to find the myths that work for you, understanding that these are all myths, not in a negative way. Myth doesn't mean falsehood in the comparative religion terminology. It refers to these patterns of symbols and stories that reveal truths. The resurrection of Jesus, for instance, you can take this as about the physical resuscitation of this particular man historically, or you can understand that this is a story about life living on beyond death. Trees get cut down, but the wood comes back. Human beings die, but we live on in some way. Nature is in this great cycle of birth and death. So don't worry, don't take it too seriously. It's all going to work out in the end somehow. But that's kind of the faith you have. That's what faith is about, is believing that it's okay. Sort of even when it isn't okay. But so we can choose the symbols that reveal that to us and work for us. That allows gay people in particular, LGBTQ people, to design, pick stories that mean something to us and not get stuck with the stories that the mainstream culture has. Yeah, and I think, let me go one more step, which is to say that I think that this is the direction that all religion is moving in. Even when you watch the History Channel on TV or PBS with stories about the history of religions, you find there is this general sort of acceptance that there are other religions and that they're all valid and that we're not supposed to wipe out the heretics. We're supposed to all live together harmoniously, and that there is a kind of a common ground for all of this, which is the mystical reality of humankind or something like that. And I think we because we as gay people had to kind of remake our own religion internally to cope with the fact that the religion that we were taught didn't explain us to ourselves. We have learned that lesson about understanding religion from outsider perspective. And consequently, we're just a little ahead of everybody else in moving towards this newer vision, which is how it is in everything. Gay people are always just a little ahead.
Yeah, yeah. The scouts of consciousness.
Yes, I was just one of the things that I love in your work are those 10 the
Archetypes.
spiritual functions.
Yes.
I was looking on my on my computer this morning, and I see that I've got some stuff about a talk that I gave at Easton Mountain a few years ago, specifically talking about your. When I Google your name, up comes my talk about Christian de la Huerta's 10 spiritual functions. And I'm very glad, especially this idea of the catalytic transformers and the gatekeepers, consciousness scouts. Our job has, in whatever way this works, the human race seems to create these people who are just a little different and are out a little ahead, leading the way for everybody else to follow. And that's the role the gay people have got today.
Yeah, which helps to explain our evolutionary significance. Because if we're going to go just by reproduction and the evolution of humanity in that sense, because up until recently, most of us didn't reproduce. And recently, meaning since we've had a sense of identity. Of course, we've been around all throughout history and have reproduced in that way. But what we're talking about points to what a particular role that we have played and continue to play, which is so important to because it provides us that sense of deeper identity and purpose and what are we here for? Talk a little bit more about that.
I got, after I moved to San Francisco, I early on got involved in gay mental health. I guess that's the way to put it, positive mental health. I worked in a telephone counseling hotline, the gay hotline. And that ended up becoming actually a program in a community mental health clinic. And I fortunately did my internship in that clinic, the Tenderloin Clinic in San Francisco, and then got a job. One of the assumptions of this gay-oriented psychotherapy was that the reason that LGBTQ people have emotional problems is because we have got a bad image of what it means to be gay, internalized homophobia.
Yes.
I went to a workshop early on taught by Don Clark. Don Clark was kind of the leading light for the gay-oriented psychotherapy movement in San Francisco at the time. He has a wonderful book called Loving Someone Gay, which continues to have one of the best discussions ever written of internalized homophobia. So it seemed like the work of gay psychotherapy was to help people get over those false ideas and develop positive ideas what it means to be gay. And that it wasn't all about, anonymous sex, crazy sex. It was about finding love, which is what all of us want. It was about being of good service because that's what people need. People's lives feel better when they're providing service. So what I've kind of understood, part of my role as therapist and then later as writer and as bookseller, my partner and I ran the gay bookstore in Austin for 7 years. A very important role because it's reading gay literature, it's reading your books and my books and all these people who have thought about homosexuality and written in novels, that's how we learn what it is.
You've played a very integral role in getting those messages out, not only as a publisher, but also when you were editing the magazine White Crane. which I want to get to in a moment, but I want to go
Oh,
back
yes.
to this phase where you were doing psychotherapy, because I know that you were also a spokesperson for the Gay Mental Health Task Force of San Francisco's Health Department, and that you were actually instrumental in adopting a gay client's Bill of Rights. Tell us about that.
Oh,
And
yes. Oh, well, thank you for acknowledging that. That's one of
yeah,
the fun events of my life. I was working at the Tenderloin Clinic. Uh, I guess probably still as an intern when all this started. The clinic had started out of this um, uh, gay hotline. Um, and the idea was that the Tenderloin Clinic which was a regular community mental health clinic in San Francisco, would also have a special program that allowed gay people, LGBTQ people from anywhere in the city to come. Otherwise, you were supposed to go to the clinic that was assigned to your neighborhood. And we were special in that respect. But it
it was
turned out we were given responsibilities for all these mental health people or mentally ill people who lived in the neighborhood, and that community mental health did medical maintenance for them, giving them Thorazine. And
mhm.
we complained that we weren't able to do our gay job because we had all this other stuff to have to do, and we needed a larger staff. And
And before you move on, I want to just, for sake of clarification and context, for somebody who may not understand the importance of what you're talking about, is that this was at a time where homosexuality was still considered an illness.
oh, yes,
Yes,
yes.
and that Thorazine is an antipsychotic medication, a very powerful one.
Of course, we weren't giving the Thorazine to the gay people. We were giving them to the mentally ill people.
Oh, I thought you were
Uh,
saying that you were giving it
yeah.
to the gay
Well,
people.
well, hopefully not. That was kind of the reason for having the gay clinic, is because some of these people might have gone to some other clinic where their homosexuality would have been seen as the problem, not their difficulty making friends because they feel bad about their body image. You know, that body image is one of the big issues. It's for everybody, but there's a way, particularly for gay people, because our bodies are what we are attracted to in other bodies. And so that's something to talk about and in therapy. And for that to be treated as mental illness would just miss the point completely, and you'd be doing it wrong.
And
Well,
and and
so
also
to
important to
go,
point out that this is only what, 50 years ago, 45, 50 years ago.
oh my God, yes, yes, I did, yes. Um,
Yeah. Oh,
So the clinic was kind of dominated by these lesbian separatist social workers, wonderful women from whom I learned what it meant to be politically correct, and they knew. Um, and the joke was that this was an example of liberalism, that the institutionalized liberalism, that the institution would say, yes, we're in favor of gay people. Yes, we want you to have a clinic, but then give us so much institutional work that we can't do it. A little bit like, not the same at all, but the way Don't Ask, Don't Tell started out being a pro-gay thing, but then
yeah.
turned out to be even worse than the
Right.
thing before. So
Right.
we formed a group at the clinic of mental health workers called the Daffodil Alliance, which stood for Dykes and Faggots, organized to defeat institutionalized liberalism. And
The
we
daffodil Italians, that's hilarious.
during and the logo was a wreath of daffodils with thorns, like roses.
That's funny,
And
which goes back to one of the other archetypes, the 10 archetypes, which is that gift that we have for using humor as
humor,
a transformative
yes,
tool.
yes.
I want to go back and look to what you
One of
just.
these social workers then got a lesbian marching band to join the demonstration, and we marched from the clinic to City Hall with this lesbian marching band, and it attracted so much attention that we had a crowd following us. And we then marched up to the community mental health offices, which were about 4 blocks up on Larkin Street. And we filled the whole block with all these people who were not really coming to our demonstration. You know, they were just gawkers. But it looked like we had a huge crowd. And the head of the mental health came out and sort of stood on a balcony outside his window and agreed to everything we asked for. $60,000 for the clinic, and a gay mental health task force be set up. And then we set up the task force, and out of the task force, we devised a gay mental health bill of rights. That is, that if you came for health services, you ought to be able to know what your therapist thought about homosexuality. And if you didn't agree that that's what he should or she should think, then you have a right to ask for a different therapist.
I want to rewind a little bit and go back, because it's such an important and relevant point, and it totally connects to the whole purpose behind this spirituality conference. Is because so many people in our community still struggle with this issue around religion and spirituality because we confuse them. And so I want to go back and reference this book, one of the many books that you've written, Myth of the Great Secret: A Search for Meaning in the Face of Emptiness, in which you write about discovering a new or modern understanding of religion. So another easy question that you can answer in just a couple of minutes. What is that? What is that modern understanding of religion that I think is so relevant to our community?
Well, I've got 2 levels of it, and let me share the first level, which is the realization that all of these truths in religion are metaphors for something that is difficult, maybe impossible to speak about directly. The way that human beings impart ideas to each other is by telling stories. You know, they sat around for 300,000 years. They sat around the fire outside the cave and told stories to one another. And out of that, this kind of mythological consciousness develops. So the first realization is that all of these are metaphors. Then we can understand that these metaphors are about the nature of what it means to be conscious. There is something different about human beings that from all other life, or we are the life on Earth. We are the way the planet has become self-aware. And that self-awareness itself is what we mean by the metaphor of God. So one of the ways of understanding the religions as they come down to us is as clues to something deeper than them. When we see that, we see, well, that's just another metaphor about what they are. And as consciousness continues to evolve, I think we will move beyond even that to some understanding of what it really is, what the universe really is, bigger than what we understand now. You know, the reality historically, everything that science, that culture has thought turned out to be has turned out to be wrong, because we raised the perspective. You know, we moved from looking at the Earth as the center to seeing the sun at the center. And then we discovered there's a galaxy. And then we discovered that there's a whole universe out there. That universe was discovered within my lifetime. You know, in the same way you said 50 years ago, 50 years ago, we barely knew the universe was there. 100 years ago, we didn't know the universe was there. We thought it was all just this small thing that we were in the middle of, and maybe there was the Milky Way. Now we know that this thing is, you know, so that's that becomes a kind of a metaphor for what consciousness is, because we can think about the size of this thing, and somehow our consciousness is part of it coming about. That's this notion about quantum reality, and it's the observer that makes things real. All of this stuff is telling us that there's more about what it means to be conscious than we understand.
Mhm.
And our job is to keep becoming more conscious. So I think, what I learned from Joseph Campbell is that there are wonderful patterns that tell us about the unconscious mind or something like that.
Mm.
From the mystical traditions, we learned that there's something that is common to all human beings. The kingdom of God is within you. God doesn't exist out there. God exists in here. God is an idea, not a physical reality the way the planet Mars is. But it's much greater to be an idea than to be just a rock floating around,
Yeah, well, let me ask you this,
in
because
saying this is myth is not knocking it. It's
right.
giving it a way of making it make sense today. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense, and it's just ridiculous.
Well, speaking of myths, in one of your 4 spiritually themed novels, Secret Matter, this one, which is a sci-fi rom-com about truth-telling and gay identity, and kind of a retelling of the Genesis myth with a gay positive outcome. And it got a Lambda Literary Award. So can you tell us about that positive retelling of the Genesis story without spoiling the book?
Okay. Well, here I'll give away all the secrets of the book. I think it's a fun read. I mean, I wrote it, so I think it is. But the book is kind of a positive spin, a gay positive spin on Arthur C. Clarke's novel Childhood's End, which I think is one of the greatest books of all time. Everything I know about God, I learned from Arthur C. Clarke. Aliens come, and it turns out they're beautiful, and everybody loves them because they're so pretty and they're kind and wonderful. We soon learn that one of the ways that they look like human beings, and they speak English, or they speak whatever language is needed. They end up, there's the big earthquake has happened in San Francisco, and my main character is a young architect intern who's come out to work on the rebuilding of San Francisco after the big quake. And it turns out that the visitors want an embassy in San Francisco, so that this is one of the places where they sort of settle. And over time, we learn that something about them that is not at first revealed is that they change color with their moods, like the mood ring. Remember the mood ring?
Sure.
This is what in the occult stuff was called seeing auras. Their aura shows in their skin, like a chameleon,
Mhm.
Well, so if that were so, then they can't lie. They always have to tell the truth, because a lie would show in their skin color. So they're very innocent beings. They've come here because they then turn out they're not really from outer space. They're from an alternate dimension, and a weapon that the United States has developed actually causes disruption in their alternate universe. And they've come here to ask us to stop doing it. And we then learn that, in fact, in their culture, one of the other ways they differ is that both male and females ejaculate during orgasm. That is, women ovulate and males ejaculate. So whenever heterosexuals have sex, they have a child, because it always works. So they can't have continual recreational sex the way we do, because they would overpopulate. So in their culture, they're primarily homosexual, except in these religious services in which they have heterosexual sex with a partner in order to have a child. And it's a religious event, and everyone comes to watch. So a very sex positive And at the end of the novel, we learn that we get a reading from their book of Genesis. They're an alternative culture, alternative reality to ours. So they have a book of Genesis too. And in their book of Genesis, they didn't commit the original sin. When God said you shouldn't eat the apple, they thought that was good advice. But it isn't God with an apple. It's God as a woman coming down and sleeping with the monkeys. And when God sleeps with the monkeys, they share her dreams. And that's how they become intelligent, is by sharing the dreams of the goddess.
Fascinating.
Anyway, so, again, it's not, the book is not exactly about the book of Genesis. It's a sci-fi novel about saving the world from weapons. But there's this nice little punchline. And that, I think, is sort of true. I think one of the ways that we need to understand gay consciousness is that we didn't eat the apple. The apple is heterosexuality. That's what the Christians say, and eating the apple caused you to see good and evil, and to think that there is this distinction between what's good and what's evil, and that these are in conflict with one another. And there is this great polarization. One of the things I think is that the polarization is an outgrowth of heterosexuality. Heterosexual people naturally understand that the other sex is different from them. Men don't understand, it's the joke, men don't understand women, women don't understand men. This is the vive la différence that draws them together, and at the same time causes them to not understand each other and to have so much conflict. And that's what we end up with in the world, as this great polarization of the world of good and versus evil, and nobody can work together. You've got to have right and left, and there's competition, and males compete for females.
And one of the which goes back to one of the archetypes, the 10 archetypes, one of the roles that we have played throughout history, which is the mediators, because we were thought to contain the essence of both masculine and feminine, which I believe all humans do, but we do it more clearly, harder to deny perhaps. That's what makes us such amazing mediators between the tribes throughout history, between the men and the women and the tribes, or between a couple. I want to go...
And the divine androgyne, that's another one of your archetypes.
Yes. So from the book of Genesis, I want to jump to Twilight, the Twilight Zone. So another one of your 4 novels with spiritual themes is Getting Life in Perspective. Romance between a fictional gay utopian, or set in a fictional gay utopian colony modeled after Edward Carpenter. So for those maybe who don't know about it, Carpenter's work, tell us a little bit about that within the context of...
well, yes. Edward Carpenter is a very important character in the development of this, what I would call gay spirituality. He was an Englishman at the end of the 1800s. He got famous, interestingly. He was a writer, and is much bigger than the gay side of him. Interestingly, he's credited with bringing sandals to Great Britain. He'd gone to India, and the Indians wear sandals, and apparently the British didn't. And he brought that back and popularized wearing sandals.
I didn't know that about him.
But he also wrote about homosexuality as a positive experience. He talks about how in primitive cultures, the shamans and priests were sexually ambivalent characters. Much as one of the other novels, if you're going to go about all my novels, Two Spirits, which I collaborated on with Walter Williams, is about the Navajo, a Navajo wise man, spiritual leader, androgyne, what we now call Two Spirit. That's one of the great images of what homosexuals have been in the past. Because we sort of were outside of the regular sexual pattern, we were thought to be special and to have powers. And maybe we do. We need to think that anyway. That's how you activate your powers, is by thinking they're there. If you don't think they're there, you never activate them.
That's right.
And we need to see ourselves as providing good service to the human race. We're not threats to the human race. We're its saviors.
And what a positive message for our times. And
so in the novel, Getting Life in Perspective, I love this novel. This is, this is like Sophie's Choice. You can't choose which is your favorite novel or which is your favorite child. Right. I love all of these books, but Gay Spirituality, Getting Life in Perspective is such a neat little story. It's told in 2 time frames. It's about a novelist kind of at the end of, or right in the beginning of the AIDS era, and he's been told that he's got Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, mad cow disease, and there's no hope for him, and that this is liable to be the new AIDS, and the world is all doomed. And he goes out and if he thinks he's dying, he's going to finally write the novel that he's had inside. And he lives out in the country. So that's a whole story, but he lives out in the country and imagines the characters in his novel as people sitting across the desk from him telling their story. That's a gimmick that novelists are told, talk to your characters. Well, they begin to get real to him. And he realizes that they are ghosts living in the house that he's remodeling. And they tell him their story, which is set in the 1800s, about a man who had a carpenter famously had a commune out in the country outside London called Millthorpe Farm, and invited some of the great literary characters, Virginia Woolf and that whole set of people, E.M. Forster, particularly E.M. Forster, who was a good friend of Carpenter's. So they had this idea of a utopian commune, and my fictional character has lived there for a while and then came back to the United States to reproduce such a thing. And my young ghosts, these 2 young men who are hitching a train, end up jumping off the train because somebody's coming to catch them in this fictional town called Perspective, Colorado. So the title, Getting Life in Perspective, is about discovering what life is in the town of Perspective, Colorado. There's a pun in the title. And that's where this utopian colony is. And through their interaction with them, they come to understand the spiritual component of what it means to be homosexual.
And we should clarify too that in Carpenter's utopian commune, that the individuals, the participants who live there were actually, if they lived today, would identify as LGBTQ.
Oh, probably, yes. Yeah. Yes. Well, the word that they were using back in those days was Uranian. That's right. Or Urning. Uranian is a neat term. It partly comes from astrology. There's this men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Well, so the homosexuals are from Uranus. And Uranus, not because of the pun on the name, right, but because Uranus was the most recently discovered planet. And it was like they saw that homosexuality, it's been there all this time, but they only became conscious during the development of sexology in the mid-1800s. And so homosexuality is like the discovery of homosexuality is like the discovery of Uranus, this alternative planet. And Uranus is the goddess of the heavens. Um, so a very nice image of our role. So the Carpenter and the like thought of themselves as Uranians.
Yeah, I
I
love
like
that.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, his work was one of the obviously one of the ones one of the one of those authors that I referenced for coming out spiritually.
Mhm.
And we've been talking about this all throughout, but I want to ask you specifically about gay spirituality and gay perspective, your nonfiction book, or one of them. And the subtitle is Things That Our Homosexuality Tells Us About the Nature of God and the Universe. So, briefly, as we begin to wrap up our time together, what does gayness tell us about the nature of God and the universe?
Well, I, a lot. I think the point I am making is that being LGBTQ, however we call it, gives us a different perspective on what life is about.
Yes.
It's not enough to simply find your opposite sex soulmate so that you can reproduce and have children, which will move on to the next. That's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful thing. But that's not what is in the cards for us. So we need to understand. We're going to see the world differently. We just are. Right. One of the things that is so clear is the search for other homosexuals in the world around us.
Yes.
When we go to the grocery store, whether you mean to or not, you're going to notice other guys that sort of look gay. There's this phenomenon of gaydar, something about us. And our understanding of ourselves is based on who those people are. We're not trying to conquer women in order to be dominant males who would have the most offspring in order to preserve our male genes. We're doing something else in here. We're looking for love. I think we're looking for service. When you look at who the gay people are, that's one of my great insights one night. I'd gone out in San Francisco, I'd gone out to the bar one night and going to a gay bar sometimes is a wonderful experience, sometimes a terribly upsetting experience. All you get out of it is rejection and everybody else is so pretty and why and me and what's wrong and all that. And all these people, they're so frivolous and look at what they look like. So we end up judging other people about what they look like on Saturday night at the bar. But in fact, if you came back on Monday morning, those people are all wearing their suits and scrubs, and they're going to work at the hospital. They're doctors, nurses, social workers, bankers, important people doing important things. Part of changing how we think about what it is to be gay is understanding how all the roles that we play and that we aren't these stereotypes. And unfortunately, the society looks at the stereotypes. Right now we're dealing with this drag queen stuff in Texas and this great confusion of drag and reading books to children and gender surgery and all this. The society has got everything so mixed up. They don't understand it. And it's all just about scaring people.
Yes. And which is one of the reasons I decided to put the conference together is because there's so much going on in terms of the culture right now that I felt it was necessary to have the conversation again.
We shouldn't be something to be scared of. We should be welcomed and honored. Not necessarily, I don't mean the drag queens necessarily, but that's all part of it too.
That's all part of
fun. The drag queens are all fun. And society, religion particularly, is kind of against fun.
Yeah. And so as we run out of time, I mean, so many directions in which you and I could speak for hours and have in the past, but I want to make sure that you just mentioned love and service. And you and Kip, your husband, have been together for almost 40 years.
Yes, we're in our 40th year.
Oh, so exactly 40. Wow.
Yeah.
And so you're actually featured in this book, When Love Lasts Forever, male couples celebrate commitment. So, as my last question to you, what is the secret to a successful long-term relationship?
Oh, wow. I see you've kept the $64,000 question until we end. I think the secret of a relationship is saying I love you a lot.
Hmm.
And being fairly non-judgmental of each other. You know, it is so easy to find the things that are wrong. Unfortunately, as we start in with dating people, you know, you fall in love first, and then all of a sudden you start finding out what's wrong with them, and then you just pick it apart. And there's a way in which we have to just let things be. I'm not saying that there are problems with Kip, but he must have problems with me, because I know I would be a handful to live with.
Well, there would be problems
But-
in any relationship. We're humans.
Yes, and allowing those things to be. You know, I think the great secret of religion, well, the punchline at the end of all of my books is that this is heaven now.
Yes.
The spiritual truth is that we are in heaven. The being that is having this experience is God. God is wanting to wake up, to be woke. And the way to be woke is to be loving, to give good service to other people, to give good service to yourself, and to choose the things that are happening to you. There's a quote from Leo Tolstoy, that it's at the end of the movie of War and Peace. War and Peace is quite something to try and watch, but at the end, this appears on the screen. This is a difficult thing, but a necessary one, that we love life, that we love it even while we suffer, because life is all. Life is God, and to love life means to love God.
You know, Toby, I was going to ask you for any final words, but I can't think of any better final words to wrap up our time together with that profound wisdom. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your brilliance and your all your studies, all the research that you've done, your wit, your humor. What a beautiful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great.
So I can see your true face. A new day for the human race after centuries of shame. Remember us, our victory.